You can't say the discovery of America without thinking of Christopher Columbus. Opinions about Columbus are so controversial they range from a great explorer to a savage responsible for the destruction of Native American cultures. What makes Columbus stand out from all European explorers? And did he die believing he had discovered India? Christopher Columbus, or Cristoforo Colombo, was born in Genoa, modern-day Italy, in 1451. This was an age defined by world exploration. It was also an age that saw Europeans develop a taste for Asian spices and luxury goods. 1453 saw the fall of Constantinople and the rise of a new power in Europe, the Ottoman Empire. The land routes to Asia were now blocked. This was a new incentive for European countries to start sailing, perhaps stronger than the curiosity to explore the world. Anyone who could find a more direct way of importing Asian goods to Western Europe could become very rich. Another reason why Europeans started exploring sea routes was establishing European colonies in Asia. These could act as trading posts and bases for missionaries to convert the locals to Christianity. But if Christopher Columbus was Italian, why was he sponsored by Spain?
In 1492, the Spanish defeated the last Muslim army, and after this 700-year war, Spain was filled with unbounded confidence and believed it was a chosen country to explore, Christianize, and conquer the world.
In 1488, Portuguese captain Bartolomeu Dias rounded the Cape of Good Hope, discovering passage to Asia around southern Africa. Vasco da Gama continued this journey into the Indian Ocean. Portugal now dominated the sea routes to Asia along the African coast. A worthy rival power, Spain now needed to find an alternative route to gain access to the riches of the East. In 1474, Toscanelli, an Italian cartographer, encouraged Christopher Columbus to sail west on a voyage to discover Asia. The said voyage is not only possible, but it is true and certain to be honorable. Toscanelli's map showed Europe, Africa, and a very large Asia. Indeed, 15th century Europeans didn't know about the Americas, but they knew that the Earth was round. So when Columbus left Europe sailing west, he was expecting to find Japan. I intend to go and see if I can find the island of Japan. Christopher Columbus, 1492. Columbus and his brother Bartolomeo sought sponsorship from Genoa, Venice, Portugal, and England, but they were all skeptical of their plans to sail west. It was Ferdinand and Isabella of Castile, the Catholic monarchs of Spain, that agreed to finance the trip. Christopher left Castile on August 3, 1492 with 2 caravels and 1 carrack, heading for Japan. When he landed in the Guanahani Islands in the Bahamas, Columbus assumed this was an uncharted island in the archipelago of Japan. However, Asia was 7,000 miles away from him. Christopher Columbus claimed the land for Spain and called the Taino inhabitants Indians because India is what many Europeans called Asia in the 15th century. That's right, the quest for India in Columbus's time meant the quest for Asia. Christopher wrote to the Queen about the Tainos. They ought to make very good and skilled servants, for they repeat very quickly whatever we say to them. I think they can very easily be made Christians, for they seem to have no religion. If it pleases our Lord, I will take 6 of them to your highnesses. This quote was used by many historians, much like a Rorschach test, each using it to express their own views on Columbus. He was a colonial villain, seeking to enslave the native peoples of America. He was a mere mercenary, acting on the Queen's orders. He was an explorer, but also a Catholic, sent to spread his religion much like all explorers back then. Indeed, when Columbus spoke of making the Taino skilled servants, he envisioned bringing more Spanish people to the island and converting them to Christianity. Was it ethical for him to impose religion on them? We must remember this was a time when European powers were imposing their culture and religion on people all over the world. Most of the time, this was done aggressively by stealing and destroying whole cities, but Columbus' first voyage was a peaceful one. The Tainos and the Spanish engaged in trade, but Columbus wanted more: the gold he had promised Queen Isabella. That's why he continued his voyage to Cuba and Hispaniola, an island in the Caribbean. Again, he thought these were islands neighboring Japan. Columbus left 39 men to watch over the land and build a colony. When he brought cotton, tobacco, chili peppers, and 6 Tainos to Spain, the crown sent him back to the new colonies for gold. On this second voyage, Columbus took 17 ships and headed straight back to Hispaniola. He found that all his men had been assassinated by a local Arawak chief, after they had formed a murderous gang in pursuit of gold and women. The Spanish crew stole the chief's gold and the natives' uprising started. Spain would not only unleash fire on the new colonies, but also start a slave trade. This was an economic decision, telling of the ethical code of European dynasties of that time. There's more. Columbus and his soldiers made the Arawaks look for gold and bring it to them. Those who didn't were punished severely. The Spanish soldiers now had complete control over the lives of the natives, exporting them in horrifying ways. Thousands of natives preferred taking their own lives to being punished by the Spanish army. Within a few years, 50,000 natives died as a direct result of the aggressive colonization or because of its aftermath. Many starved as they couldn't farm anymore, and many others died of illnesses brought over from Spain. By 1600, following intense European colonization, smallpox had decimated 90% of the Native American population. In 1498, Columbus started a third voyage looking for mainland Asia. Sailing south from Hispaniola, he found the Gulf of Paria, which separates Trinidad from modern-day Venezuela. Seeing the Orinoco River, he thought he had found the Asian mainland, but Columbus was losing control. In Hispaniola, his own crew had risen against him, and the Spanish crown had heard news of his tyranny and incompetence on the islands. In 1500, they removed Columbus as a governor and replaced him with Francisco de Bobadilla, a member of the Calatrava order. Bobadilla soon reported to the crown that Columbus and his brothers, Bartolomeo and Diego, used terror to govern Hispaniola. The report described some gruesome facts. Dismembered natives paraded through the streets to discourage further rebellion. Tongues and hands cut off for a remark or for coming short. Historian Consuelo Varela stated, "Even those who loved him, Columbus, had to admit the atrocities that had taken place." Columbus and Diego were put in chains and sent back to Spain, where they stayed in jail for 6 months. Once free, the brothers pleaded to Isabella and Ferdinand to restore their wealth and right to navigate. Though Columbus would never be governor again, he was allowed one more voyage to the new colonies. In 1502, Columbus left in search of the Strait of Malacca, between Malaysia and Singapore. Indeed, he still wasn't aware that he hadn't discovered Asian land. This time, Columbus landed in Honduras. This would be a difficult voyage, filled with storms and resistance from the native people. Columbus was stranded in Jamaica, and the new governor in Hispaniola refused to help him. Hundreds of his men died, and he only managed to get back to Spain in 1504, ill and exhausted. During his last years, Columbus wrote of his achievements as an explorer, which he considered to be a fulfillment of the Bible prophecy. He had been governor of the Indies, he had sailed to India, and he looked for Japan and mainland Asia. Indeed, when Columbus died in 1506, following several attacks of gout and influenza, he wasn't aware that he had landed in America. It was Americo Vespucci who, in 1502, wrote to the King of Portugal about finding a new world. On 7 August 1501, we dropped our anchor off the shores of that new land, and we determined that the new land was not an island, but a continent. Even though this text was written before Columbus died, he didn't know about it. Not just that, but this was an age of intense debate regarding the existence of the New World, or America. In 1507, 2 scholars, Matthias Ringman and Martin Waldseemüller, published Introduction to Cosmography, a geographic breakdown of the time. Ringman suggested the name America in honor of Americo Vespucci. It was Vasco Núñez de Balboa who, in 1513, crossed the Isthmus of Panama on foot. This meant that there was definitely another continent between Europe and Asia, and that it was divided into 2 main lands, North and South America. We can see Sebastian Munster's map, published in 1540, 34 years after Columbus's death, showing the American continent as we know it. So was Christopher Columbus the first European explorer to set foot in America? Actually, the Vikings had done it 500 years before in Greenland and Newfoundland, but they didn't settle. Columbus was the first explorer who opened the gates to the European colonization of America. Does this make him a savage, responsible for all that happened to Native Americans?
Invader. He got lost coming here, and he's the one that named us Indians because he thought he was in India. So he's not a good figure to the Native community.
Some historians argue in his defense, saying that if Columbus hadn't done it, someone else would have. This was a century defined by aggressive European colonization. YouTube historian Knowing Better warns against viewing Columbus as a scapegoat for all the Native American massacres. Columbus could only be to blame for it, he says, if he would have planned everything that happened to the Native Americans after he died. If we look to him through a historical lens, he was no worse than anyone else. But if we hold him up to modern standards, yeah, he was a bad guy. Columbus is just one part, the first part, but a relatively small part in what happened to the Native Americans. Do you agree? Was Columbus just a regular explorer of the time, doing Spain's bidding? Should the horrors that he inflicted on the people of Hispaniola erase him from history books? And does the fact that he died believing he had discovered Asia diminish his position of discoverer of America? Let us know what you think in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe.